everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Adam Beisman, and I'm an MBA student here at MIT Sloan. And I am thrilled to introduce our next panel, which is Decisions on Ice, the next frontier of hockey analytics. It's very exciting, especially right after the trade deadline. Today, we have, for our panelists, we have Phil Desaulniers, who is the head of hockey analytics technology for the Montreal Canadiens, Megan Chaika, co-founder and CEO of Stathletes, Jeremy Rogalski, who is the director of hockey analytics for the Boston Bruins, and then moderating our panel today is Arda Okal from ESPN. Like all of our panels so far, there'll be about 40 minutes with about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. Please feel free to submit all of your questions through the Cadence app like the rest of the conference, and with that, I'll turn it over to Arda.
Adam, thank you very much. Round of applause for Adam. He's been doing great. Him and the volunteers here at the Sloan Conference have been doing a terrific job putting panels like this together. Hopefully has everyone had a good time at the Sloan Conference so far? Thumbs up, round of applause, awesome. So like Adam said, if you have any questions, I want this to be as collaborative as possible, particularly the last few minutes of the panel. If you got any questions, I'll be reading as many of them as I can, so get them to Adam and other volunteers so you can get some of your questions answered. So this is a panel about the next frontier of hockey analytics. The only trade deadline question I will ask up on stage is, Jeremy, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're here.
Yeah.
Like a round of applause for Jeremy for showing up. The Bruins had quite a day yesterday, so actually, just in general, just 20,000-foot view, I'd love to know what your trade deadline week looks like.
I mean, conversations are going on for weeks building up into it. So, you know, typically it depends a little bit on where the team is. Obviously, boss goes on the road with the team or stays back. But we've just got a large board. We're documenting everything, all the calls coming in, all the interest, or obviously if we're looking to add, obviously, more target-focused in terms of fits and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Scouting reports are coming in, obviously. We're dialing up the viewings on players, you know, as we're getting closer to that week. And this week's just been chaos. I mean, as it obviously, you know, we just alluded to, like, it's a busy week. The last few days are crazy. And, you know, you're working until 9, 10 o'clock at night, and 3 o'clock hits, and a lot happened at 3 o'clock yesterday, so.
Indeed. Indeed, a lot happened. Philippe, what about from you? A little bit quieter on the Canadiens front, but what was trade deadline week like for you?
Yeah, so from my perspective, so my work is more on the tech side, so building the tools and getting everything ready. So for me, the trade deadline has to be as uneventful as possible, like regardless of what happens on the team side. And that was pretty much the case for this year. So we're getting everything ready. Management has all the tools, the reports, all in hand to be able to make those decisions. We have our director of analytics who's going to be with them. But yeah, on my end, the least amount of things that happen, the better for me.
Fair enough. And Megan, you were very busy yesterday with TSN, creating content, doing segments, providing analysis, as you expertly do. How does trade, other than being on camera and providing content and analysis, how does trade deadline differ from other weeks for Stathletes?
I think it's just an exciting week in hockey in general, and yesterday teams made a big splash. Like, it was kind of reinvigorating that hockey's being more aggressive, when historically I think people feel that hockey's very passive, and GMs have been more conservative on trade deadlines. To sort of see these like blue chip players be moved, with the excitement coming off Four Nations, which actually ended in Boston, so it's nice to be back here so soon. I think that all eyes are on hockey and the NHL as, you know, a market and a sport that is not only like energetic, but is willing to like step into the future. So that's why I like doing this panel too, because I think largely people think hockey is behind the 8 ball or slow, when it's conceptually quite difficult because of the speed, the ice, the boards, how fast the puck goes, how fast the game is in general. So for me, trade deadline's like a culmination of everything that goes crazy during the season, and you have that pause of like, what's gonna happen and how are you gonna proceed, to what I think most people would say playoffs is one of the best in sport is the NHL.
Four Nations was mentioned. Round of applause. Who's Canadian in the audience? How about a round of applause for Connor McDavid, overtime winner? Yep, thank you. Just wanted to put that out there as a Canadian. All right, let's talk data analytics.
Yep.
A lot has changed, even from me as not an expert, but someone who consumes a lot of hockey. I can see that the landscape of hockey analytics and data has changed drastically, even in the last decade. But I'd love to, maybe Philippe, we can start with you and come back this way. Just what have you noticed working so closely in this realm? What are some of the things that have changed the most in the last decade in this field?
Well, obviously, so long story short, I was with SportLogic before. We started the company in 2015. And when we first started, so about 10 years ago, the data set that was available for hockey was minimal. It was basically box score information, some shot counts, and things like that. And at SportLogic, that's what we introduced. We introduced a new, more granular. It was event-based. It's those loose puck recoveries, those passes that were not being tracked at the NHL level, and that is basically what started the evolution in hockey. I think having all these data sets, and since then, I mean, the introduction of tracking data in the recent years is now having that other step of that evolution.
I mean, respectfully, I did start my company in 2010, and like NHL teams at that time were actually paying over $1 million. We had clients, and we provided, I bet, 3,000 to 5,000 event level data, and now it's exploded into tracking data. We do a lot of computer vision, locations, obviously, of all, including the puck, automated. And the biggest challenge now is what do you do with all the data and the capital costs, the infrastructure, and hosting. So I don't really think that the revolution started 10 years ago, largely started 20, 30 years ago. And I do think that it's not one company or client, it's people that are willing to take risks and put money into tech and in different spaces. So I try not to focus on hockey because I don't think a lot of problems are hockey-centric. I think they're enveloped in like larger problems of just technology. So using like my tech hat, typically I think of like how to break that down and bring those solutions in scalable ways to hockey.
Kind of two things for me. One, definitely echoing what Phil and Megan said, like just the way to describe the game. Working with I started in the coach's room doing video work for them and watching how even a pre-scout for a game evolves from, coaches previously would watch like 3 games of video and kind of look for some common trends in that and maybe do a deep dive on the season, but now you can describe like how a team breaks out or how their power play formations are in so much detail now that wasn't available 10, 15 years ago to put that together. And then the second thing, kind of to what Phil alluded to, his job is actually very important in the trade deadline because if a team's internal platform breaks on that day, you're in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of information in there that you're not going to be able to get out. So I think teams investing in technology to bring that information to them too has been a massive change in probably the last 5 years, I'd say, Phil.
Yeah, around that.
Yeah.
And with that comes the communication, right? Not just how we talk about it. Like, Megan, you do a terrific job of bringing this information in digestible formats to a wide audience on television. But I'd love to ask you from a perspective of talking with coaches and general managers and front offices, how has that evolved, even in recent times, at all levels of hockey?
Yeah. For sure. I think, do you
Well,
want
it's fine.
Megan.
Jeremy, you can.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
No,
sorry.
Megan, go ahead.
Well, you're like the type of people that I would talk to, up to GMs, presidents, obviously. And I think, it used to be a push. So like from 2007 to probably 2012, it was always outbound. Can you use data? Are you interested? Do you like the box score? Do you think, shots are right? Do you want to know about passes? And then it suddenly started trickling in of questions incoming where people realized that there's probably a lot more that they could do on that side, whereas now the inbound is overwhelming. And there's people that have played 20 years in the NHL that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame that I get calls from. So it's crazy how much that, I guess, watershed moment where people realized that data wasn't about just being a tool or something they could use, but like an underlying framework of how to make decisions across all the organization. And I think the real breakthrough too is like the flip, like we're talking about Arda, that you can use it in media, you can use it in digital, gaming, making all these products for people to understand and follow. Like, how do you know how good Connor McDavid is without data? Now you have NHL Edge tracking data where you know his speed bursts, you know how many he's had, you know exactly how fast he is versus the next competitor. You never had an idea beyond being in the arena and going like, holy, that person can skate. And until you see that in person, it's really hard to conceptualize. But with data, we can tell you just how much faster he is. So that's really cool for our GMs, but like anyone can give you that. I think it's like that fandom that has really made it, you know, set it on fire and made data as like the biggest currency in sport.
I think for me, it's actually interesting you use the word storytelling too, because I think Megan's bang on. I think about a lot of inquiries coming our way now, which is great. But I think also in terms of, you know, building a relationship with a coach, understanding what their schedule looks like, what their needs are, where they have windows of time to work through and educate on the data. But also, I think packaging it in a digestible way, right? You're still in some ways doing the same thing with a coach, where if there's a point you're trying to make, there is a time for a fact. This guy's whatever on face-off percentage. That's a fact. That needs to happen. But sometimes you've got to package it in a narrative that really helps them understand how they can then turn around and use that fact to improve the team or communicate to a player. So there is a component of that storytelling that's needed as well.
Yeah, so to tack on what Jeremy was saying, so I really see three things mainly that are important in order to have communications flowing between our group and the coaches. The first thing is really, it's really great to have a translator. You usually will have like someone on the team, or you want to have someone on the team who's able to speak the language with the coaches and who understands on the analytics side. And so we'll be creating some reports, setting up the information so it can be consumed, and then you'll have. In our case, it's Chris, our director of analytics, who will be talking with the coaches and knowing what the coaches are expecting and presenting it in a way that they understand it. So that's one thing. The second thing that we found effective is we've started creating some concepts that we try to keep as simple and as high level as possible, but that then can become part of the vocabulary that we have with the coaching staff. So just to give an example, we'll be talking about players that have a certain number of pillars. We call them pillars, which are at the bottom. They're metrics, very specific metrics that we're tracking, but you don't need to understand all the details to know that, okay, so this guy has a 4-pillar or a 5-pillar, and this way you know like where he stands at a very high level without having to dig into it. The third thing that we do, that we've done, is get the coaches on board. So work on a way of organizing the metrics based on what they're looking for, what their understanding of the game is, and organize the information that way. So then when they start digging into it, they actually see what they were looking for. And you get the buy-in from them too when you're doing that, because they've worked on it to build that structure.
I would add one thing too that I thought of. You raise a good point too. I think visuals are huge here too,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's a heat map or just
Colors.
picking the right graphic or trend or something. That's, I mean, reds and greens. Like it helps. It truly does help.
Yeah.
Not to play your role, Arda, but I have a question for Jeremy, because you've been through some different coaches. Do you find like coaching staffs as they change? From my work, I find some are far more just ease of use and understanding, and their ability to implement it in their game flow works a lot better for some people's style than others. Have you seen that change with like different coaches?
Yes, it's definitely seen a change. Also, I think now you're starting to see coaches who've worked with different teams. So
Totally.
before you're educating on this is what we can offer you. Now you're coming in with a set of preference, or this is what I worked with previously. So, more recently it's been coming in with a set of expectations for, I know this works for me. Is there anything you want to add or change or do whatever? So it's definitely, there has been a change.
And I want to that's a great question. I want to generalize that, like, whether it's a first-time coach like Marty St. Louis, whether it's a Jim Montgomery or a long tenured coach. Let me start with you, Megan. Like, from different experience levels of coaches in the NHL or otherwise, how have you found their acceptance and how they use that in their daily jobs?
And I think it can be background too. You know, you're a math grad, you like numbers. Some people come from engineering. People come to coaching in so many different ways. So they have such a different way of approach and understanding and ease with it. And I think then they can just implement it and know what's assumptions, what's noise, and what's actually important to them in their job that they need to do. So I think it's just being realistic about your personnel. But I will say that I've noticed doing the draft a lot and at ESPN and working with draft people and in the CHL and doing a lot of junior work, that young people now expect data. They want it. They want to take control of their own, whether it's a coach or a player coming up. So I'm seeing like the 25 and under crowd. It's not, should I use analytics? It's like, why aren't we using analytics? Why isn't my agent doing that for me? Why isn't my team doing that for me? And I think that too, both empowers people working in tech, but also empowers like the person who that data is being used to dictate their career, right? Giving them some control and oversight and insight into what they actually have to improve. So it's kind of like flipping it on the head a little bit.
Yeah, like the paradigm is changing.
Correct, yeah.
That's great. I will say like one way that Megan and I directly work together, just real quick, is when I host a game on ESPN, we will receive information from our stats and information group. We call them SIG affectionately at ESPN. But then aside from that, we'll also receive a game notes packet from Stathletes, which is rich with advanced information, which is very valuable to me, especially as something happens in the game. I'll just use an example. Let's say a Brock Nelson is carrying the puck into the offensive zone and he's doing it very well and he's getting into offensive zone entries very, very efficiently in a game. Then I'll have information from Megan's Stathletes' packet to be able to tell me where he ranks in the league or how efficient he's been in the last 10 games and things like that, which is very valuable to the audience because at the end of the day, I want to help inform or be a conduit for the information that's there. I may not get to 80% of what's there, but I'm glad it's there because in the event that I need it, it's very valuable in that moment, especially when it's pertinent to something that's happening in the game. So that's from our point of view, so to speak. I know there's a lot of people here that would love to be on stage here one day or occupy a position that's data focused in teams or sports, et cetera. How many are students here, by the way? A lot of students here. Okay, that's great. So why don't we just go down the line. Jeremy, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm really fortunate to work for the team, that I grew up rooting for. It doesn't happen often, I don't think. Although maybe, I don't know, we'll see in a few minutes. But yeah, I grew up and when I was looking at schools, Moneyball had come out, obviously, but Theo Epstein was leading the Red Sox to the World Series too. And for me, that was a non-baseball, didn't have a career per se. Kind of gave me the motivation to take a chance on working in sports. And so went through college. I literally mailed resumes to two people with every hockey, football, baseball team. Had a percentage of responses, and ultimately was able to get an internship with the Bruins. Hung around, a job opened up, and was able to start. My first position was with the coaching staff, so working in the video room with the coaches, and then transitioned to the front office shortly thereafter.
And I was definitely extremely nonlinear. Like I worked in the public sector, finance, and John Deere, even agriculture, but I was always in like data stats. I really knew I wanted to start a company, so I took advantage when I was in university. So anyone that's a student here, if you do want to, be an entrepreneur, especially as a woman, we have 2% of venture capital goes to women, actually probably less now, to be honest. So it's a very difficult path, and largely, as you can see, sometimes it's hard to like find your voice in that space too. It's typically dominated by men, which I will say, happy International Women's Day. I see all my great women in sports out there, my FanDuel women out there. Thanks for supporting me. Yes, big day. But yes, so I don't think like to end up in hockey, you need to, only do hockey. I think bringing ideas from outside industries and learning and developing your craft and your technical skills is what will separate you. So mine was very kind of non-linear, but I got there and I've been working in it for 15 years.
So in my case, my background is software engineering, and I've been doing it for a little over 3 decades now. I was in all sorts of domains before getting into hockey. As I was mentioning earlier, in 2015, started with SportLogic, which just happened to be like a startup that was doing some cool tech that I was interested in, had interest in hockey. And then we built that company, and that's how eventually one of our founders went to work with the Sharks, came back to Montreal to work for the Canadiens, and then at that point joined the Canadiens in the role that I'm today. And yeah, I would say to what Megan was saying, it's definitely more about build up your skills on something that will be valuable for the team. As was mentioned on one of the panels yesterday, like the team, it doesn't really care that you love hockey. It's not about you loving hockey that will get you on. It's really about the skills that you will have for the problems that they're trying to solve at that point.
So let's talk about, Megan, specifically just building a business, right? Building Stathletes, building such a large and vast database, getting all of that information. You've also recently done that now in the women's hockey space, right? So as much as you're willing to share, how does that happen? How have you been able to approach that and succeed in that?
I think just going back to like startup basics is how you build companies, right? Having sustainable revenue, driving that, figuring out what your model looks like. And for me, I always knew I wanted to be sort of in that enterprise tech space too. So finding the right people and the right clients. In many cases, it was saying no to clients that actually didn't align with what we wanted to achieve, and bringing on those sort of gold standard clients that we knew we would march to, the level of innovation that we needed to get to the revenue thresholds, especially non-funded. So, as a woman founder, having to drive, compete against companies that raise, multi-millions, which, they have to pay back too. So if you can succeed against them and not be funded, you have like the ultimate wild card. You're like a really scary woman in the wild, which I think I am to a lot of tech people. But it's a good place to be in because then you can like chart your own path and really focus on your own projects. And we've been able to do some of the funnest and even like the ESPNs, the FanDuels, the big brands that really have their own tech, have their own space, and know what they want to accomplish. It's been not only a privilege, but a dream to have a company for 15 years and to have 200 people, have meaningful jobs and have kids and houses. And I mean, the sprawl of what entrepreneurship can bring and really like the joy in it is what I try to be mindful of in the darker times. And there's certainly been times when, 10 years ago, will we make it? Or 5 years ago, are you doing the right path? But I think if you are interested in entrepreneurship, especially in sports, there's never been a better time because there's so much data available now that you can build all sorts of innovative companies on. So I wouldn't start another analytics company as I did 15 years ago. I would look forward to like what's important now. So automation, AI, gaming. Maybe you build an application that reaches children with sports in a different way. We all know TikTok is the biggest thing that I think it's something like kids spend like 3 hours on TikTok a night. It's like, are they even home?
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Do you spend 3 hours on TikTok a night? Oh my gosh. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Oh.
Our heads down.
Oh my God.
But I just mean, I think, when you're looking forward and as an entrepreneur, you're always looking 5 years out. So anyone in this room that's like, I have the itch to start a company, think about how to capture the attention or provide, different slices of the society, especially younger people, with information about hockey.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I would bury down into.
Absolutely. I constantly resist the urge to do any viral dance in exchange for attention on
It would do
TikTok.
well.
I know, and that's the constant battle. But this could go viral. Let's.
It gets like 10 views. Yeah.
I have a specific question for you, Jeremy. So you did video analytics to data analytics more broadly, right? And I'm curious about just like the data and the analytics versus, we always hear about data versus the eye test, data, eye test. This is a conversation that may never end, right?
Yeah.
Just being able to see versus what might be missed, et cetera. In your unique perspective now, having video analytics, data analytics, what are some of the things that you're finding that maybe one does better than the other, maybe you're seeing better than the data might suggest?
Yeah, I mean, there's such a good complement. Like, there's always, especially coming back to coaches, I think there's always going to be a preference order. There's your eye test, there's your video. How do the data analytics complement it? It's so subjective. Hockey is so subjective in terms of, 5 different people could watch a play and come up with a different description of what happened or who to blame. It's always about blame. So who to blame for, if something were to happen. But they're such a good complement. And I find as I watch games too, I don't know about the two of you, but I'm seeing things that are happening in a play. And I'm so eager to, maybe they're not quantifiable now, but get to the point where they are quantifiable, where you're trying to,
constantly.
You see a seam, you're like, that pass is going to go through that, that's really bad. I know it's coming and it happens, and you're like, okay, I want to talk about where the players were and who left the gap open. And
How do we measure that?
Yeah, there's just so much growth to come. It's so exciting on that frontier, I think.
Philippe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so to continue on that, so yeah, definitely you will see, watching video or even watching the live game, you will definitely see details that are not captured with the data that we have at this point. Hopefully one day we'll get there. And then seeing that is definitely important in understanding how the players are playing, how the team's behaving, and again, it's something that we want to get to at some point as much as possible. We'll probably never get to the end of it, so it's probably going to be always a complement.
We got a lot of questions from the audience, so let me ask one more question, and we'll get to as many of the audience questions. Thank you for all of them. There's several. I'm glad that we're all very engaged here as a team, so that's awesome. I just want to project the future a little bit. I'm very bullish on VR. I use it obviously for entertainment, but also for just different uses all the time. I just want to expand this question because I know that there's some NHL players, Joey Decord, Devin Levi, there's players in the NFL that have used it. Megan, we were talking about like college athletes using it as well. I'm just curious, more generally, VR or not, what are some future applications, future trends, anything that you're looking forward to that might be very, very important in this space? Why don't we go, Jeremy?
Me first, sure. Yeah, the VR thing's definitely been interesting, and I know that's something that's been talked about a lot. Goaltenders are currently using it for their preparation, or some of them certainly are. Hockey's still less scripted, I think. You go to special teams right away or certain plays, but you're not a quarterback, trying to throw a route or anything like that at this point. So maybe you two have better ideas in terms of the VR. It's something we're certainly intrigued by, but figuring out maybe the exact application. There's just been so much growth. Like Megan, you mentioned the CHL earlier. Like we didn't have CHL data, 10 years ago. So even when you're making drafting decisions or making trades like we did yesterday, you've got a book on a player now you didn't used to have.
Well, and hockey's so international too. Like
Yeah.
people don't really realize that. You talk about baseball and they have a handful of countries they scout from, or the NBA. It's like hockey is like what, 20? I think we do 24 leagues, 25 leagues.
Yep. So
How about your best players in Switzerland?
Yeah, for sure. So the growth, it's something we're already doing, but that growth is still happening. I think describing the game still too. I guess pose recognition is something commonly referenced, like understanding are there player development opportunities in a skating stride or a stick position or things like that. Like that's I think coming pretty quickly, hopefully soon here.
Yeah. So just the tracking data revolution that's happening right now. I mean, we are picking up now the fruits of that. Like the tracking data has been there now for 3-4 seasons. We're making good ways into using it. Having that tracking data at other levels as well is something that's probably coming now, and it's going to be really helpful. And like you were saying, Jeremy, the next step I think is really going to be around pose, where you're going to be able to really locate players as they were on the ice, where their stick was, is probably the next step as well for getting the models to be better, getting more precision on everything we measure.
And with that like VR, AR idea, I think what ESPN did with Beyond Sports, Big City Green to animate, right? Use the tracking data to animate and bring in a whole different younger generation watching sports. I think I told you, Arda, I really made a pitch to the Toronto Maple Leafs that I want Carlton the Bear to play hockey and clip it and put it on YouTube because we can take our tracking data and make it into VR. Why not just throw a bear on it? And my kids would watch that. Like I just took them. I just took them to a Buffalo Sabres game, and it was like, and I actually took them to the All-Star game, and Connor McDavid walked by, no problem, not interested. Sabretooth walks by. There's a celebrity here. We need a picture. So
Big mascot fan. Mascots are so important.
You love mascots too.
Really quick Big City Green story. So I was lucky enough to be the reporter for the Big City Greens 2 activation that we did. And one of the questions I asked Beyond Sports was, what if they get into a giant fight? Like, what if it's like a bench clearing line brawl? Like, how is it going to look in animation? And their response was, oh, they're going to look like they're just circling around each other. Like, they didn't like animate them fighting and throwing punches. Like, no, none of that. And this would be how hilarious would that be? Is if you had like all the Bruins players and Penguins players would just like knock down, drag out, and on the other side they're just like dancing around.
Oh,
that's why you need the pose data.
Be amazing. I like this question from Riley. Megan, let's start with you on this one. So 10 years from now, how different do you think an NHL box score will look like in terms of what statistics are listed? Or if any, do you think it'll stay the same?
I think it'll be very different. And I mean, I think there'll be layers of like legal in terms of what's like the official box score. But I think what fans can touch and work with and follow, I think there'll be a lot more bite-sized, curated ways to smartly follow your favorite teams, players, share, understand, engage. A lot more ISO cams too. I love that when ESPN does that. I want to see a Matthew Tkachuk versus, I was gonna say Brad Marchand. I'm sorry.
That's two.
No.
That's two.
Yeah, sorry. It's a panel foul. But like those type of like aggressors, right? I'd love to see like ISO cams on both of those. So I think a lot more of that's going to come, this like curation to your fandom.
So one of the things that I've noticed over the last probably 2 or 3 years now is how much more, at least on the media side, people are talking about XGs. And it's not something that's really made it yet to the official standard box scores. And I think it's a really key metric that is super useful to understand what happened in the game. Like was it a defensive disaster? Was it that the goalie was a superstar? Like the breaking this down is fun and interesting to do with a metric like the XGs. So I think it has started to catch on, and I think it's going to continue and will be even more mainstream than it is right now.
The other thing I'd say too is it's funny you say box score and right away I think like newspaper and ink, which is crazy what we grew up with. And I guess to that point, as Megan was talking, I was thinking about how digital it is now. So I bet click to video probably will be a part of that too, being able to click in and actually watch the stat instead of just reading about it and going to the highlight package as well.
Yeah. For the kids, a newspaper was a piece of paper. I'm just kidding. This one is from Justin. How has analytics enabled scouting international players where data is sometimes non-existent? So Megan, you sort of mentioned that, just like the layers of available information. Justin, why don't we start with you then on that one? Like, how has that impacted either whether it's your role or just the industry at large?
It is. I mean, there are some leagues certainly where we're still production reliant, I think, as you were alluding to earlier, but there's another layer to it now. We can understand if a guy is at a certain level of production, okay, how is that happening? Kind of what's his usage overseas? Are they playing power play? Are they on the penalty kill? It's helped a lot. Like, we're in constant communication with our scouting groups, and video is good too, because if you're going to make a recommendation to send a guy to France to go watch a player, like, you'd like to have a little bit of certainty or oomph behind that before you book that ticket. And I think we're getting there for sure.
I think just the accuracy is constrained by like the quality of the video and like what the feed looks like. And I will say that there's some leagues that absolutely love their special edition sweaters that are crazy and whatever, but like you can't do it every game. Yeah. Make it easy to track and make the numbers visible, please. I need like a zoom in on my face. It's a PSA.
That would help, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. So there is, there is actually data that's available for a lot of the leagues that where we're scouting draft prospects. It's not complete, but it's like Jeremy was saying, it's definitely getting there. And we will use that with whatever the scouts are saying. It's, in some cases, it's a little more difficult to get all the details, but it definitely getting there.
I want to go back to the box score question. I just thought of something. What's a stat you wish people would use less?
Ooh.
Like that you just like, I don't care about this stat, but it gets talked about way too much.
He can say it. He can go right there.
Really?
Plus minus.
I was gonna bring up plus minus. Like what? So explain why, in your opinion, like plus minus just doesn't give you.
Well, it's just that, it's first of all, it doesn't take into account shot quality goals are rare. There are cases where you will be assigned a plus where it's really maybe your teammate that should have gotten it. So it ends up being noisy, let's say.
I'd throw Corsi out there too. I still see Corsi. So shot attempts for and against while on ice. There actually is value sometimes just to knowing it relative to your zone time and things like that. But we've had expected goals for a long time in the league now, I think. So having both set of context together is useful.
I think expected goals like solves most problems that these other stats we're trying to solve with the data that was available then, but it's now, it's come along now.
Sarah had a question just expanding on PWHL, women's hockey in general. She says, investment is lagging, but do you think that there will be faster adoption or success in implementing data tracking as the league continues to build up from scratch?
Yeah, it's always a challenge because I think whenever you're a new league, there's so many different areas of business that you have to focus on. Actually, I was just with the Montreal team. We were delayed like 20 times yesterday. So me and Poulin were on the same flight. It was like the coolest thing ever. I did not feel worthy. But I think that there are elite level athletes that deserve all the treatment. And that's part of my march is like every year for the last 11 years, I've done, women's sports in some way, shape, or form in a major project with my company. And we still do, a lot of work in terms of figuring out what that business model looks like on our side. Because it does take a lot of capital, and there is a lot that has to be laid in terms of infrastructure for technology for leagues to really, have the impact on their end. You can do all the fancy work from a tech company side, but if there's not a way to implement it and not a partner that knows integrations, I think it's really challenging. So it's been very nice that all media and other entities have stepped up to carry it, and even like I'll do my strength in numbers bet on the PWHL for FanDuel, and that's really cool, so I can talk about it. So I think it's just as important to have that aspect of it normalized in conversations that it's important to watch and think about and treat those athletes as they should be treated at the level that they play at. So I think it's just a process, but I hope in 5 years that there is, relative parity between the NHL and PWHL when you look at data.
Yeah, that's very important. Like just the idea of normalization, like to see it many, many times in your subconscious. It's like, okay, this just feels right and looks normal because you see it so often.
And I'll try to blend it in with like NHL. Like I'll do like an NHL pick and then a PWHL pick.
Right, yeah.
And that's just it is what it is.
And as it should be, exactly. There are a lot of students, so we did get a bunch of student questions. Let me ask one more. With needing the technical skills to get into the industry, what do you think the next big challenge will be and the requisite skills for all the students in the room? You want to start, Philippe?
Sure. So as I was mentioning, we're like at this point we're working a lot with the tracking data and the at different levels. So anything that has to do with spatial temporal analysis is definitely something that we're looking into, and in general, just understanding software systems, like how do you do a data architecture, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think like anything, I mean, it's such a buzzword right now, but to do with AI, automation, computer vision, anything that helps work with these like extremely large data sets, if you can be in any of those technical realms and get a chance to take on some projects or have internships in that area, there's just an explosion of jobs and very well paid, but you have to be very well skilled to do them. So if you do have interest, I think that ultimately that's a really easy way to break through in sports right now because everyone's looking for people with those skills.
Yeah, I would say we're in such a huge period of growth, team side or otherwise in the sport. And I guess I get the question a lot. I'm sure you all do too. Like, is there a language I need to know or this or that? And I think just having curiosity and a willingness to learn different. There's not one universal coding language or anything you need to know. And we're really teams aren't so flush with staff that the research into tracking data is definitely one part of the department, but there's so many things, building the technological platform internally, doing analysis for the coaching staff. Like, I think certainly we're all hopeful that just analytics staff continue to grow and grow, and there's not one language or one thing I think you really have to ace. You just have to sort of be willing to grow and learn and adapt to the needs, for me.
Yeah, very important to be able to adapt, especially in this industry where things are always changing. I want to, as much as you're willing to share, I'm curious about a win that came from data. Is there a player? Is there someone that you're like, this person may not be as highly valued as I think they should be, and the data, you used the data to make a case and they ended up getting a more prominent role, or you were proven right, or something to that effect? What win can you share from your career that was based on your analysis and research?
So, it took me a while to get there. Maybe that's a bad sign, but we were actually, this was a group effort. This wasn't just me, but we had a lot of discussion a while back. This is actually a hot button topic in the league now, is goalie workloads. So we had Tuukka Rask a while back. He was playing 65, 70 games a year, and it just didn't look good at a certain point in time. There was a heavy workload. So we were, I think, one of the first teams in the league to really, we did a study on him, tried to figure out an optimum, with our goalie coach. Okay, I know, what days of the week or whatever he likes to play, but in a month he should play this amount of games ideally, and mapping out a goalie calendar. And I think, it's obviously caught on a bit around the league, and I think, it helped drive a little bit, hopefully more playoff success for us.
Is there an ideal number?
I can't share that.
You can't share that, okay.
Yeah.
I'll guess it's in the 40s.
Depends on the
30
goalie.
to 40. Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I obviously sit on the tech side, so I can't really share my clients' wins without their permission. But goalie is certainly the one area. If you have a lot of shot data and understanding, we track, everything from the goalie pose to where they are to how they move. So I guess someone that's out of hockey would be my brother right now, who was there for 7 years, and I think 2 of his goalies won the Stanley Cup, and he was did not spend on players, didn't have the budget, so he just used data to try to choose his goalies, and they ended up going on teams that won the Stanley Cup, and they were the goalies. So it's pretty cool to see the data in action where you're like, wow, you actually unearthed winners.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, in my case, there is one case that I can think of, but it was before my time, so I'll keep it quiet. But and I guess most of the others are, the jury's still out, so we'll see soon.
All right, non-answer. Why don't we end on this? We got a couple minutes left here. What's the biggest takeaway for people watching now? There's a lot of great information here, a lot of great anecdotes and stories, and prognosticating to the future. But what is a big takeaway, whether we've talked about it or not, that you would like the audience to take away about hockey analytics, whether it's the future, whether what's happening now? If they leave with only one thing, what's the one thing you would like to leave them with?
I guess to me, it's International Women's Day. So all the women in the room, it is very challenging working in sports and hockey as a woman, but I would love to see more of you in here. So please connect, network. There's space for you. Focus on your technical skills, focus on what you do well, and don't take no for an answer. No, I always see as not yet. And hockey would be better to have more of you in it.
So I would probably say that hockey is probably the best sport to get into from an analytics perspective at this point, just because of the level of, we're at the right sweet spot of maturity and acceptance, meaning that there's still a lot of problems to solve, and teams are working on them.
Yeah, I would say growth and excitement for sure. And to echo Megan's point, like there's a lot of people from different backgrounds now reaching out and getting interested in the game, which has been really exciting to see. It makes us better certainly too. So I think the league in general, it's definitely in a period of growth and excitement, and especially on the team side as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of excitement. I love that. No is not now. I love that. Please take that, because that applies to any industry. I even talk about it from the broadcasting perspective. If you hear no, it just means no in the moment. It does not mean no forever. It does not mean that you can not go back in 6 months even, or a year, and follow up and see what might be the case. Anything can happen and anything can change. So a big round of applause for our panelists, Philippe, Megan, and Jeremy. Awesome information. Great, thank you very much for your time, everybody. Thanks for coming.